Thank you for joining us. For everyone's information, the Institute for Democracy and Economic Affairs Malaysia is very committed in providing a safe platform for all the parties to discuss, which involve both internal and external. IDEAS has a policy of zero tolerance towards sexual exploitation and abuse. Everyone is responsible in ensuring a safe environment. The inability to adhere to this conduct will cause further actions to be taken. We believe that all of this can be administered without infringing the freedom of speech. Good morning, everyone. A very pleasant Thursday morning from Kuala Lumpur to all of you. On behalf of the Institute, I would like to record my special thanks and a very warm welcome to all our listeners, viewers, to our program this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, for this morning, we'll be listening to the online discussion entitled The Financial and Capital Integration in ASEAN. For everyone's information as well, this online discussion is the third series of the entire ASEAN prosperity initiatives that IDEAS is working on at the moment. For the first webinar or the online discussion, we have discussed on the political dynamics and the political security in ASEAN, which involves the situation in Myanmar. On our second online discussion, we've talked about the digital economy as a post-COVID-19 recovery mechanics in ASEAN. And we've been very fortunate, actually, to able to host on the third online discussion with the title Financial and Capital Integration in ASEAN. Now, ladies and gentlemen, just to give you some sort of an insight what's happening in ASEAN, as we all know, the road towards the economic community has long been charted ever since the region was hit with the ASEAN financial crisis in 1997. Now, we have seen few and very strong initiatives that have been put on the table, especially when in 2003, the ASEAN finance ministers have endorsed the roadmap for monetary and financial integration of ASEAN, the RIAFINT, and later on in 2007, we have endorsed the ASEAN Economic Community as a blueprint for us to realize a greater and a closer integration of economic transactions in ASEAN, and with having the goal of creating a single market and production base by 2025. And 5 years back in 2016, the ASEAN finance ministers and central bank governors has approved the strategic action plan for financial integration from 2016 until 2025. I think these are part of the major framework that we have in ASEAN today on how to show the great effort and the work towards integrating all actors, all state members into a closer and more integrated financial and capital. Now, IDEAS would also like to thank and to welcome our panelists for today's event. Without them, we would not able to have a really constructive and fruitful discussion on this today's topic. Allow me to have the honor, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome, firstly, Mr. Satoru Yamadera. Mr. Yamadera is the advisor to the Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department at the ASEAN Development Bank, who will be discussing what benefits greater intra-ASEAN financial integration and cooperation can bring to the region. What are the challenges? What are the prospects, limitations in fostering the said regional links? What has been his experience in fostering greater standardization and harmonization in regional bond markets? And finally, the roles of fintech and the ESG that can be played in the ASEAN financial integration market. On the second speaker, we've also been honored to have Dr. Pitchaya Sirivunnabood. Dr. Pitchaya is attached to the capacity building and training economists at the ASEAN Development Bank, and she will be speaking about what ASEAN can learn from the European Union experience in fostering regional financial integration, as well as how ASEAN's own financial integration effort can take into account of this financial inclusion. Now, before I pass the floor to Mr. Satoru, or I know it's more better, we've addressed it as Tomo, Mr. Tomo and Pitchaya. Now, from the ideas perspective, is that we think that the topic is very timely to be discussed. I had really some phone call conversations with some of our allies and counterparts, which includes ministries and agencies in Malaysia, while we are actually weathering the pandemics, which is quite hilly and which is quite having its upside down kinds of journey. We should never forget and be distorted on the long process as where the region should be heading to. While we are focusing on the challenges in a short term right now, with some domestic interests and national agenda, as well as the health crisis that each of these ASEAN countries are facing right now, we should never forget, or we should never put the ASEAN financial integrations at the back of our daily attention. So I think we should strike the opportunity while it's still hidden. And I think that financial and capital integration, while it's still a hidden opportunity, we have no doubt that it will be the great opportunity and the reality in the future. So let us just focus on the long term and the long journey that we have ahead of us, while we are weathering with the short-term challenges with the health crisis that all of us are facing in our home respected country. So I think my own personal opinion, I think that this discussion today is very relevant and very timely to ensure that all of these countries, the state actors, the SMEs, business owners, ministries and agencies are fully aware on the track that we have charted to, and to ensure that we are still on the right track towards a greater harmonization in ASEAN by having and materializing financial and capital integration. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think with that kind of insight, I hope that you're able to draw your attention to the online discussions today. Next, I will have the honor to welcome Tomo to give his presentation. If you may please, Tomo.
Okay, Zokhri, thank you. So allow me to share my screen. So I hope you can see my presentation file. Can you see?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so let me start. So I will briefly discuss the financial and capital market integration in ASEAN, and maybe briefly in the three parts, why we talk about integration, why we should consider the integration, what's the benefit and cost. I just briefly explain it, and what are the challenges, the impediments, and how we are trying to maximize the benefit. So I'd like to explain our sort of initiatives, activities under the regional cooperation and sort of harmonization, standardization, and particularly in Asian context, I'd like to emphasize the interoperability because the concept of harmonization means you need to be in the same rules, same ground, but as we understand that we need to respect the differences. But also we need to integrate, which means some part needs to be standardized. And also in terms of the standardization, we always pay attention to the interoperability, which is a kind of technical terminology, but you need to ensure how those countries are connected. So this is very much different characteristic when we comparing to the European integration, because Europe, they try to harmonize. But Asia's integration is through interoperability. So these are kind of a basic concept that you need to understand first. Okay, so the first, the financial integration, capital market integration, potential benefits. And economic theory tells you the integration gives you more sort of efficient allocation of resources. And efficient allocation of resources will increase the return of your investments. And also, this will lead to the consumption smoothing, which means if the country ABC integrates, still we will see some sort of different economic conditions. We may see some bad situation in economic A, but economic C, B may be better condition. And so through integration, we can smoothen the consumption. And also, we will see the increase in competition among financial institutions, which will bring the cheaper, wider financial service. So this is really the merit. And of course, these create the sort of financial stability. So eventually, we hope to see the financial stability through efficient allocation and through regional integration. This needs to be discussed how it needs to be done by member countries. So eventually that would enhance the macroeconomic discipline. But of course, there is a potential cost. This integration may create the market volatility, and largely because we can control over the various policy measures. Because if market needs to be integrated, you need to sort of reduce the impediments, barriers, which means you may lose some controllability over various economic actions. So which is bigger? I think this very much depends on the various circumstances. Of course, eventually we want to increase economic and financial stability, but depends on the circumstance. Sometimes we see higher volatility more than expected, or maybe we can see the huge benefit of integration. So the optimization, I mean, the optimal scope of integration is very much depends on, for example, geographical areas or economic linkages or even political linkages. So I would like to emphasize that the integration per se doesn't always good. I mean, you need to consider what are the basic underlying facts, and also these sort of linkage, economic and political linkage often plays more important role. So that's the point. Maybe we can discuss it later. And when we consider the ASEAN economic integration, we always look at the kind of first starting from trade. And blue line is the Asia and excluding China. And orange line is the Asia in general, which means the including China. As you can see, the China plays a very important role. Actually, ASEAN interregional trade is about 25%, so smaller than this blue lines. So when we consider Asian financial or sort of economic integration, I would think it's better to expand beyond ASEAN. Particularly, we call it ASEAN +3. +3 means the China, Korea, Japan. So the ASEAN plus China, Korea, Japan, their trade integration is quite high. Actually, this Asia orange line is quite similar to the ASEAN +3 share. So which, as you can see, the share is very much closer to EU. So it is always important to consider the context in ASEAN +3, not just the ASEAN. Just for your information, for those who don't know the ASEAN +3, ASEAN +3 is a group of East Asian countries. As I said, ASEAN 10 countries plus China, Japan, Korea. We call it ASEAN +3. And ASEAN +3 activities was established particularly after the Asian financial crisis, late 90s. So the importance of the function is the ASEAN +3 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting. And this meeting provides the various sort of discussions. And two of the achievements I would like to highlight is one is the Chiang Mai Initiative Multilateralization and Asian Bond Markets Initiative. Chiang Mai is the bilateral swap agreements among the member countries. So if one country was hit by some sort of economic shock, the other country will help through the agreements of bilateral swap arrangement. And particularly, this is important just before the IMF step in. And the other part is the ABMI, the Asian Bond Markets Initiative. This was created after the Asian financial crisis as a lesson, because Asian financial crisis was largely due to heavy dependence of short-term dollar finance. And suddenly, the market prospect has changed. So these sort of short-term finance was reversed. So to change the situation, the governments agreed to focus more on the USD to local currency, short-term to the long-term. So that's why we've been promoting the local currency bond market developments, and ADB has been playing the Secretariat role. And this is a kind of structure. So I'd like to emphasize this ASEAN Plus 3 has a kind of established institutional arrangement. Actually, ASEAN Plus 3 meetings, we have many meetings among finance ministers, ministers of economy and trade, or various ministers meeting. But I would say this finance ministers central bank process is very much institutionalized. So at the top, there's the central bank finance ministers meeting once a year, and there are deputies meeting twice a year. And below that, we have, you can see TF1, 2, 3, 4. This is called the task force. And the task force is the kind of director level meeting. And this is a kind of working level meeting. And after they agreed, they elevate their decision to the deputies and central banks. And ADB act as a secretariat of the ABMI. And under the task forces, we have some sort of working groups and also the activities. Under the task force one, focusing on to create a supply, we have credit guarantee and investment facility, which provide guarantee to the corporate bonds. And also under the task force one, we promote infrastructure finance. At this point, we are very much focusing on the ESG bonds, environment bonds, so-called green bonds, social bonds, sustainability bonds, market development. And task force to focus on the demand, and we try to provide information to the investors. You may have heard the website called Asian Bonds Online, which is managed by ADB. We provide various market information through the website, including the quarterly market analysis called the Asia Bond Monitor. And the task force be focusing on the regulation, standardization, harmonization. And under the task force 3, we organize ASEAN Plus 3 Bond Market Forum, which is the platform bringing the public and private sector experts to discuss various regulatory or technical issues. And the task force 4 focusing on the infrastructure development. And currently, we have Crossborder Settlement Infrastructure Forum, which is a forum consists of central banks and CSTs, and they discuss how to link those market infrastructures. So these are the institutional framework, and we organize various meetings under these forums, meetings, and we sort of provide the inputs to the task force. And if they agreed, that is elevated to the deputies and the governors meeting. And eventually, we can get the endorsement if they agree. And that becomes a kind of regional policy and initiative. So that is a very important part of the ASEAN Plus 3 process. Of course, we have similar process for ASEAN. But as I said, often the case that the ASEAN Plus 3 discussion also, together with the ASEAN discussion, leads the Asian sort of an integration discussion. I'd like to explain a little bit more on some actual activities. First, ASEAN Plus Reborn Market Forum. As I said, this is a platform to bring the experts. Experts means central bank staff, SEC staff, financial institutions. So this is really kind of open forum. ADB manage the forum. We often call it the ADB can play the honest broker role because, I mean, it's not easy for the private sector to talk to central banks and regulators if there is some progress. So we take up those comments and issues and we discuss. Also, sometimes some sort of the coordination issues. Each jurisdiction have its own objectives or sort of a mandate. It's not easy to bridge. So we often try to bridge them. And even in one jurisdiction, there's a kind of regulatory silo. So the central banks, SECs, they may not talk to each other often. So we play the role. So that is how this ABMF acts. Currently, we work on the common bond issuance framework or the ASEAN Plus 3 multi-currency bond issuance framework, which try to create a regional common bond issuance platform, I mean the program. So the company can go to Malaysia, Thailand, or Philippines, Japan, or Singapore with the same document. So they can issue the local currency more easily. Also, we've been promoting the standardization. Well, you may never heard of the ISO. This is a kind of technical standard, but we've been promoting the ISO 2022, which is the technical standard for banks to communicate globally. And based on that, you can exchange various information. So those technical standards plays a key role. We also promote the LEI, legal entity identifier, to identify the entities in financial transactions. So these are the initiatives. You can also get the information, basic information standardization from the Asian Bond Market Guide. Please visit ABO. I'm sure that you'll be surprised how vast that information can be containing in the website. Another forum is Cross-Border Settlement Infrastructure Forum, which is, as I said, the composed of the central banks and CSDs to facilitate cross-border securities transaction. We've been discussing how we can connect central banks and CSDs. Previously, there are a few ideas. One is why don't we establish the Asian CSDs, like we can create some sort of supranational CSDs, which the idea was declined. And the CSD linkage, this is among the CSDs, but in order to ensure the settlement and also to reduce the settlement risk, we also invited the central banks. So that is called the CSD-RTGS linkage. CSD is the Securities Depository, Central Securities Depository. RTGS is the real-time gross settlement system of the central bank. So we are discussing how we can connect. Of course, to reflect the recent technological development, we are looking at the various new technologies. So hopefully we can come up with the new idea to connect. Actually, under the existing technological framework, Bank of Japan and the Hong Kong Monetary Authority established the linkage this April. But to expand the linkage to the other jurisdictions, we are hoping that maybe the new technology like a DLT blockchain may support the new idea. So these are current initiatives. And also, we support various capacity building efforts by the ASEAN. Particularly, we support the ASEAN Capital Market Forum, ACMF. One of the initiatives ADB supported is the ASEAN Corporate Governance Scorecard. Also, to support the ASEAN financial integration, we provide various capacity building support. Well, this is actually important point. ASEAN central banks, or I mean the ASEAN heads, understand the importance of capacity building to sort of level up, because development gap is actually the biggest impediment of the integration. So ADB is supporting. So that is the end of my presentation, and the rest of the slides probably I can explain through the Q&A. So thank you.
Thank you, Thomo. for introducing on the framework as well as the important actors and the ecosystem on how regional integration can be made, and especially on the point of ASEAN +3. It's quite an insightful. Ladies and gentlemen, let us move to our next speaker. Dr. Pitchaya will then talk on the comparisons between the AEU and ASEAN, as well as her experience dealing on regional financial integration. Over to you, Pitchaya.
Well, thank you very much, Zokhri. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we all can see that. Thank you.
All right, so allow me just to make it bigger for everyone. All right, okay, thank you very much. And I think I'm lucky that I have Tomo to be the one who actually speak first and rely on the, ACE overall background to understand the financial integration, particularly in ASEAN and the ASEAN +3. So, so from my part today in this online discussion, I will just touch upon the initiative and also the regional framework that ASEAN has done in the past 20 years towards the facilitation of their financial integration. But before doing that, just allow me just to briefly make a quick comparison between the two regions. Because as Tomo already mentioned, like for the European Union, basically what they aim for is standardization, harmonization. For ASEAN, on the other hand, it should actually aim for interoperability. So in that case, we all know that these two regions actually adopted a different process and approaches when it's come to strengthen that regional financial integration. So like for Europeans, as you can see here, we are familiar with the euro's currency that already been ongoing for almost 20 years in Europe. So that's how we can see the most significant sample for the European financial integration through the single currency framework. And when we're talking about the standardization and harmonization, in order to supervise and also go on with the operation as well as the implementation, the European Union they have established the central institutions just to cover and responsible on this operation part. So we can see the sample of the central bank, the European Central Bank or the ECB, as well as for the capital market, they have the Capital Market Union or the Master Plan for Capital Market. When it's come to payment and settlement system, they had the SEPA actually be the one who responsible in this sector. In order just to make a successful standardization and harmonization, policy coordination has been done under several mechanisms for the EU. So they have a single supervisory mechanism, single resolution mechanism, as well as the European system for the financial supervision. So this kind of the thing is, you can see that it's very systematic, and also you can see a real body that actually enforce the rules, as well as supervise and make sure that operation is ongoing toward that. ASEAN, on the other hand, they don't have such central institutions. They only have ASEAN Secretariat, with basically play the role of the Secretariat rather than the operators. But in the common approach that they have this that you already mentioned earlier is the roadmap for the regional financial integration, or the REALFIN, that's endorsed in 2003 under the blueprint of the AEC community 2015. They insert the element of the financial integration in it, and recently just because they want to see more concrete progress when it comes to the financial integration, they come up and endorse the strategic action plan of financial integration. This also include the element of financial inclusion and financial stability. And in separate strategic action plan that had this taxation, cooperation, and across through these, they have the surveillance and monitoring system on that process. So when you see that what this is this slide it is to give you an idea about the development that I just mentioned. So in that, what I just want to focus on is the 2016 to 2025 is the AEC blueprint. When it comes to strategic action plan, what they decide is just decide the milestone with the associate action or the activity that they would like just to have, and also the goal that they would like to see within two period with a period of 2 years until 2025. They would just like to see what's the end goal for the financial integration. So in that sense, to implement this SAP for the financial integration and the taxation cooperation, what ASEAN did is just they build up this sort of working bodies for the regional financial integration. So if that in that case, what they tried just to do is to have this certain working committee to work on in each particular sector. So what are they? So you see here, there's many working committees, and that's they also work individually, and then they come together just to share the progress twice a year with each other in when it comes to the implementation of the action in their strategic action plan. So we have financial services liberalization for bank and non-bank sector. We have capital market liberalization, capital account liberalization for the improvement of capital mobility through the capital account. Capital market development more likely is the one that has been mentioned already by Tomo-san about the development of capital market. This includes bonds market and the equity market. In particular, initiative for the banking integration process, they focus on the how to implement the qualified ASEAN bank. What does it mean by the qualified ASEAN bank? It means that sorry, I had to plug in my charger. It means that this bank for one country, for example, for Malaysia, would be able just to operate in other country in Southeast Asia, like for example, Thailand, and be treated like a local bank. So this sort of regulatory restriction toward the foreign bank would not happen when they use when you are acknowledged as the qualified ASEAN bank. They have payment and settlement system to ensure the interconnected of the payment system or interoperability of the payments and settlement system in the region. They have financial inclusion to ensure that everyone do not left behind, and access to finance, as well as to promote the financial awareness and financial literacy in the region. And last but not least, they have taxation cooperation. The most activity and the most initiative that they is trying to do is that to avoid the double tax payment across, in the transaction among the country member countries. And the last one is the ASEAN +3 finance cooperation, which Tomo's already explained to us. The focus is on the financial stability and also the local currency bond market. So I don't want to spend much time on this, but it's more like the indicator that they use to monitor, the achievement or the progress of the activity that they listed in the strategic action plan. So you can see that, for example, by the time of 2025, they would like to see the ratification of 10 packages of the financial commitment. Those kind of the thing, or they may just already has a certain point at how many countries should be ratified that packages, or like in the financial inclusion, they aimed it for like 30% of the average financial exclusion by 2025. So this is more like a goal that they want to achieve, and they have to monitoring periodically. Let's just touch up on a little bit on the barriers. So the thing that has been mentioned continuously, and Tomo already said too, the challenge is the economic and financial development gap within the region. So that's one of the things that when it's come to implementation, you know, you want to put the same standard, or you want to put the same framework applied to every country in the region. It makes things a bit more difficult when the development level is not the same across the region. So what would ASEAN do? They actually try to cope with that by use the principle of placing financial liberalization. And then they come up with the ASEAN formula of the ASEAN minus X, or the 2 + X approach. So what does that mean? It means that, for example, if two countries like Malaysia and Indonesia are ready just to sign up the agreement on banking integration, in that case, there's some requirements set up, the agreement sets up for two countries, and two countries said, okay, we just want to go ahead and go with this. So that's two, right? Two countries. When Thailand see that, that's agreement, and then look through the requirement and everything, and they said, hey, I'm also ready just for this agreement, I would like to join, then it means that Thailand also signed that agreement, when is Thailand become an X, so number 3 countries. So basically what I'm saying is just this approach is giving a flexibility to the country in the region. So when the country is ready to join the agreement, then they can just join. It sounds like it's a good idea when it's come to the Asian or the ASEAN way. However, when it's come to the progress of the integration, it's make things a little bit more difficult to achieve the final goal of the financial regional financial integration 2025. What if someone not ready by that time? What would they do? There's no penalty, there's no punishment or anything. So this could be a barrier that we have to keep in mind. So moving toward 2025, what exactly has to be done in order to strengthen the regional financial integration? Some relaxation and removal of restriction has to be do even further when it's come to the most likely capital market and the banking sector. Standardization and harmonization, even though it's not something that ASEAN really aim for, just to have the same policy across the region, but still at the certain level of the international standard, all of the country have to achieve that, and just to be able just to use the framework that accepted by international floor. Regulatory framework and also the financial inclusion and innovation. Because of the technological development gap in technology, then how do we apply all these financial technology like fintech, blockchain, or those kind of the crowd data whatsoever, just to adapt in this region and give the benefit to our region at the same level, as well as the interoperability in the region. This is actually require innovation just to achieve it. Financial stability is something that Tomo already discussed about the Chiang Mai Initiative multilateralization. That's the ASEAN +3 collaboration. However, when it's come to ASEAN itself, they don't they only rely on the ASEAN +3. They don't really have the ASEAN initiative by themselves. They have one ASEAN monitoring integration monitoring office that actually do the macro and financial surveillance, and MRO as the ASEAN +3 also doing the same thing. Sustainable finance, the green bond, the social bonds, that another thing that already been discussed, how ASEAN should include this sort of initiative in their work plan. That's another thing that they have to think. So it comes to the conclusion and the policy implication that I would like us to raise. When you compare ASEAN and European Union, the way that they do things, the process and the mechanism, what we really see out of the success of the financial integration is institutionalization and standardization. So of course, well, they have working bodies, but they don't really have someone who actually really come in that central institution to do the operation, implementation, and the supervision. So maybe the idea of establishing such independent central body can help speed up the integration in the region. Regional financial integration framework implementation is what we've been discussing, is just to develop a single set of a rule at the standard, at least use the international benchmark, just to develop this sort of framework. I understand that ASEAN has got many technical assistance from other international organizations, not only ADB but also OECD and IMF. So they can just use this kind of assistance to develop the regional framework with the international standard. Monitoring and evaluation process definitely is the important one, just to track the progress that actually of the activity, the implementation of the activity in the strategic action plan that they have. This has to do periodically, and also would help us just to collect the data and use this data to establish the comprehensive database that can use for the research later on. Last 2 points, financial surveillance system, the financial stability. They already have MROS and the ASEAN Integration Monitoring Office for surveillance system, but how to strengthen the personnel and just to ensure the disbursement of the regional financial safety net. That's another thing that we should be continue to discuss, because COVID-19 is actually the crisis that ongoing. How could we ensure the financial stability with our regional financial safety net is already in place? Regional financial cooperation, the last point, to ensure that we need political will, a strong political will to push this, as well as to reinforce the regional cooperation to advance the financial integration process. So I stop here, and both I'm more than happy to answer your question in the discussion round later. Thank you.
Thank you, Pitchaya. I like the consistency or the coherence from Tomo and to Pitchaya. I think you aptly mentioned that, while Tomo has laid out the framework, and then we go on to the minuscule aspects in terms of its operation and how to actually materialize ASEAN +3, as well as all of these financial integrations. Now, while both of you are actually speaking and presenting all of your points, I managed to jot some points. And of course, I do have something to ask. Perhaps my background is not in financial and capital integration. I'm naive and ignorant when it comes to this. But as I said, it's really good to learn and to be exposed to what's happening in the region. Now, on to Tomo, and perhaps Pitchaya will also able to supplement the answer. Now, you've laid out all of this regional framework with the ASEAN +3, with all of the institutionalization process. The chart is actually wonderful. It works as at the high level kinds of cooperations between banks as well as between agencies. Now, how does actually the public or the grassroots, like people who are not in the bank, like people like me as a commoner, able to feel the benefits of all this, high-level discussions? Because it sounds a bit complicated. It sounds very economical, intellectual in that way. But I think the business owners or the SMEs in each of the ASEAN countries are not resonating well, or are not apprehending well onto this framework that you've mentioned. So what would be the ADB strategy, perhaps, to enhance and to ramp the communication so that every actors, even though that you are not from the bank, you're not from the government, you are just a business owner, you are just a fintech developer, or just a commoner citizens like me, able to understand this framework, Tomo?
Yeah, thank you for the very important question. First of all, I'd like to, confess, actually, this sort of finance or banking, whatever, this is always technical, and not just, financial integration. It takes time to really get the feeling that how things are impacting. Otherwise, I mean, if you're borrowing money, maybe how much the cost and how easily accessible. Well, things actually very much linked. And also the change happens over the time. Let's say, for example, ASEAN +3 has been working on the creation of a local currency bond market. What's the impact on the ordinary people? Actually, in a macro sense, at the beginning of 2000, local currency bond market was almost negligible. And then now the ASEAN plus China-Korea market exceeded Japanese local currency bond market, and actually coming close to Europe, euro-denominated local currency market and the US Treasury market. It's not easy to grasp the size of these markets, but point is now ASEAN countries, the companies can easily tap the local currency finance. Before, people borrowed the USD, and now you can borrow in the local currency. This creates a significant difference if like a COVID-19 situation currently. Okay, previously, if you are heavily relying on the USD, suddenly, probably you face the FX sort of a devaluation. Suddenly, you are borrowing in USD, become 20%, 30% higher sort of a burden in terms of your local currency. So the change is really happening, but thanks to all those efforts, now things are more stabilized. Even under this COVID-19 situation, corporates, even probably small retail shops in Malaysia, they can borrow money from banks quite easily and quite low rate because now domestic financial system is sort of stable and robust enough to cope with those sort of change in the international environment. Again, these are not easy to feel, and things are changing gradually. So that's why that you won't be able to feel what is happening, what is the outcome. But those changes taking place over the time. And also, I would think that I don't know whether it's good for ASEAN to have some big financial change, like introduction of the euro. So the introduction of euro was a big change. Everybody, men in the street, suddenly people stopped using the French franc and changed to euro. But because of that, they also face a lot of problems. So it is not always a good thing to have noticeable financial change. I'd rather say that the gradual shift of financial transaction may be able to bring more benefits. And also, probably under the COVID-19, you also start feeling that the more sort of online payments are more easy to use. And also, even you go outside of your country, you can make those sort of payments, even transfer. And recently, well, I don't know Malaysia, what sort of payment method is used, but Singapore and Thailand, they have the payment system called Prompt Pay and Pay Now, which is kind of instant payment, mobile payment. And the financial community agreed to link. So now, with a mobile phone and a mobile number, you can easily transmit money from Thailand to Singapore, vice versa. So these are a gradual shift, but eventually things will change. Again, the no change may be a good thing, and because outside of your country, there are so many changes like a COVID, serious things, various things happening. But thanks to the financial stability played by the coordinated action by the central banks and policy maker, you actually not feeling that much of change. I wouldn't exclude, of course, COVID is, influencing you and your business is affected. But if there were no actions by those policy makers, it could have been much worse. So that's my answer. I hope I'm answering your question. Thanks.
It is, because From your explanations, I can sense that the regional integrations or the financial and capital integrations are working on the ground without us actually realizing it. You know, for instance, like where you talk the examples on the online shopping. I mean, Malaysia has its online shopping too, like Lazada and Shopee. What I know from this online shopping is how to get my stuff. But I probably am not aware there might be a discussion at a regional level on how to integrate from the Malaysian-based online shopping company with Thailand, with Indonesia, Vietnam, as well as ASEAN +3. So yes, I think all of this high-level discussion, it's not known to the public, but it is working rather by a subtle way on how to make us closer. Very, very impressive. And it reminds me to the point that you've mentioned in your presentation, regional integration is not always good, but I think we always supplement it with a strategic way on how to minimize whatever the cost that it brings us when we integrate with one another. Good point. Any additional points on your Pitchaya?
Yeah, so just when we're talking about the online shopping that Tomer just said, well, at the regional level, there's a lot of discussion about the RTGS, the real-time settlement. You know, so that's kind of help in terms of driving the transaction of the particularly e-commerce during the COVID-19. That's one thing that's very important. Further to that, in terms of the data security, you know, those kind of things that related to the e-commerce is also discussed at the regional level, just to ensure that when we use the data, is it safe for the, you know, the customer, is also safe for the company or the firm, e-commerce firm who actually use this sort of mechanism for the you know, real-time payment settlement system. And also when we think about the COVID-19, one of the issues that's always come up is the remittance. You know, it's like because in ASEAN happened to be one of the region that send out people just to work outside the country, like for particular for Philippines, Malay. Not so much Indonesia, as well as you know, like the country like Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, even Thailand. So this remittance is actually also related to finance region integration discussion at the regional level, and how to facilitate to make it at the lowest cost, like not as much as possible, just to make things easier and make the financial flow in the region easier. So this kind of thing always be a discussion at the regional level, and how just to come up with the strategy to lower the cost of remittance. So in addition to that, when we're talking about the financial inclusion, the financial literacy, there are also some discussion in you know, in the committee, the working committee, like how just to reach out to the people who actually outside or in the rural or the remote areas, how to educate them, how to make them understand more when it's come to, you know, anything related to this sort of new technology. How do they use the application to facilitate their life better in transaction? The non-bank agent, when they use this to transfer their money to people that live or get the money from people who work inside the city. This kind of thing always like at a discussion, and how to make things easier. And then eventually it's implement at the local, at the level of the implement into policy at the local level. So I stop here. Thanks, Zokhri.
Thank you. Yeah, so at least while we are not knowing, something's actually working out, and we really have to appreciate those. And I think ideas as an institute, I mean, we are not a bank, we are not an expert, but perhaps what we can assist the region is that by doing all of these engagement projects, advocacy projects, so that everyone in the public at the grassroots is actually aware and have the idea what's going on at the regional level. Now, onto your presentation, Pitchaya, I really like when you actually make a philosophical comparison between the EU and Europe. EU is moving towards standardization and harmonization, where it requires a top-down approach. So these are the institutions, we follow the institution, no discussion. Whereas ASEAN works on interoperability. And I think, Tomo, you also reflected this in your first two slides. While I firstly heard about interoperability, this is the first time I'm hearing it, but I can sense that the spirit of ASEAN, or the spirit of ASEAN +3, is that we are trying to bring everyone together, and we are making sure that everyone is feeling comfortable when joining as a team. I think it has to do more about the way we feel as an Asian, or the way that we feel as a Southeast Asian, where you need to feel like you're like home when you want to start something new, when you want to integrate something new. So I really appreciate that, despite that people have been saying that ASEAN is a bit left behind, we are not like EU, but we do not want to be like EU, right? So I know Pitchaya and we are both Southeast Asians, so perhaps we feel the same way. Perhaps we synchronize it that way. After all, our countries is just next to each other. But what do you think, Tomo, on this? You know, the Southeast Asian culture of like bringing everyone together, try to accommodate as much as we can, even when it comes to complicated financial integration matters.
Well, thanks for the very interesting question. Well, I think we need to understand a bit of the history also as a background. ASEAN countries actually sort of really formed after the World War II. But Europe, they have such a long history. Often European, I mean, I based in Brussels for 3 years. I was actually the EU watcher at that time before the introduction of the euro. And although even at that time, European always mentioned that we are different, but from Asian point of view, they are the same. I mean, they're quite same in the same culture, very similar culture. But Asia, particularly ASEAN, in the process of nation building, has just started after the World War II. So that we need to understand those differences. That is very important difference. So the aspiration of Asian integration, particularly ASEAN integration, needs to go together with the process of nation building, which is still in the process. So this creates the big difference, and because of that, we need to accept the differences by country, which is not bad actually, because you don't need to confine every parties into one box. Actually, we need to understand ASEAN integration. We call it open regionalism, which is a bit contradictory word. Regionalism sounds like putting everyone into one box as a region, but ASEAN regionalism is different. It's open regionalism, and that's the uniqueness of ASEAN integration. ASEAN always want to be open to the other region, and so it's a loose. But EU. Like 80s, when they talked about the single market, which was introduced early 90s, people are afraid of sort of a fortress Europe, because there was a risk that the Europe was so much sort of coming to Eurocentric. I wouldn't deny that possibility, and even now they have that sort of risk, and also. From our point of view, often we face what Europe sort of propose may be Eurocentric. And we always encounter how we can balance such Eurocentric proposal and make it more sort of internationally acceptable proposal. Again, coming back to ASEAN, it is quite open, and it's open regionalism. And I think the philosophy is different, and we need to understand first that we need to understand ASEAN. So that's my comment.
So it's a battle between a result-oriented and a process-oriented, and ASEAN chooses process orientations more than result orientation.
It always brings the outcome, but it's a different time frame. Again, the Europe. I don't know. Maybe they started the sense of Europe from the Westphalia when they started the so-called nation state, and which goes back to the more than 200 years ago. But ASEAN has the history and not yet to the 100. So, we need to understand. So, but ASEAN is sort of about creating the process of integration. So we need to look at these issues in a different time frame.
Right, and this is also the conversation that I had with Pitchaya yesterday, that for all of the operationalization of ASEAN, we just want to make everyone feel comfortable that there is no there is a certain pressure in terms of expectations, right? Why do I be friends with you? Is because of the goods or the benefits that we want. But we are more moving towards like getting everyone on board, making everyone comfortable being on board. And perhaps that is how that we do things in our region, isn't it, Pitchaya?
Yes, but I think one of the things that I think both me and Tomo has been already mentioned is just that because this is so much different in terms of economic and financial development among the ASEAN country members, and not just trying just to make everyone comfortable when they join. The more advanced or more developed country actually trying just to help the less developed country just to get on board, like through the capacity building or the consultation. There is sort of also capacity building activity not only from the ADB side but also among the member country that help each other. Like for example, when some country to set up the capital market, a country like Thailand or if I'm not so sure if Malaysia, actually having some Thai government sitting there at the capital market just to help out the government official in that country just to learn about the system and how to do it. And we also received the assistance from the +3 country like China, Japan, and Korea. They also sent their personnel into the new capital market or the new system just to sit with the government official in that country just to help one-on-one training, those kind of things. This kind of the thing actually helping not just make people comfortable to join, but just boost up the readiness of the region when we have a certain goal, a common goal that we want to reach together.
Zokhri, also let me add, if we compare ASEAN with other regions like Central Asia or South Asia or Africa or Latin American countries, if you compare with Europe, maybe ASEAN's sort of integration or sort of how to say, the level of integration may not be high, but comparing to the other part of the region, ASEAN integration is much higher. And also there is a big merits and benefits. Comparing to the other region, because of ASEAN, the sense of the community, countries are developing. This is a very important point. There is a kind of a peer pressure, also peer learning, peer support, and that creates a huge difference. Again, that really, even if there were not the sense of ASEAN community, each member country could have been delayed in terms of economic social developments. So it's a different time horizon. The end goal is different, but the sense of community actually helping a lot. Again, it's not so well noticeable because change is happening quite slowly. But if you compare with other region, the difference is, I would say, obvious.
Right. I like the notions of peer learning and peer support. So we see that we are in this together, and also we balance with the expectations and results that we wanted to have by having regional integration. Now, speaking of results, Pitchaya, in your presentation, you've mentioned on the three phases or the three events that happens throughout the region, where we have the ASEAN RIAFIN at first, and then you have the AEC economic blueprint, and then now you have the SAP for the financial integration. So between one point to another, do you see that there is actually a commendable growth, a commendable success that we could appreciate from one point to another, regardless how speedious it is or how slow it is? At least we appreciate there is a growth. Yeah. So I think if we're able to go through that kinds of narrative, then I think all policymakers and ASEAN readers and students will appreciate that perhaps from one point to another, there is actually a result that we have achieved. What do you think?
Actually, the result, like at each time of the when it's important roadmap or the blueprint happen, like as I mentioned earlier, when the real fin, we only have the 3 working committees back then. We have the financial services liberalization, we have the capital account liberalization, and then we have the capital market development. We only have 3 working committee back then. And then after that, like you see the current one under the AEC blueprint 2016 to 2025, we have strategic action plan. More working committee actually established during that time, just to ensure the operation, the implementation, the agreement that they have in and the action plan that they have lie out in the SAP. What I see is just looking at the capital account liberalization. Back then, when we talk about, we just look at the capital flow through the capital account. But then this day, as Tomo said, they have a local currency settlement, which means that we don't have to rely. We have to rely less on the US dollars when it's come to the payment settlement system. So that's like initiative you see through times, slowly, but it's actually happening. Banking sector, the same thing. We have the ASEAN banking integration framework, and then we try to push the QAB, the qualified ASEAN bank. So this thing, we adopted a certain level of the knowledge that we see from Europe to adjust to the culture and the system and the mechanism in the region and try to make it work. Giving the fact that we need to help the less developed country in the region just to go and be able just to join this initiative later on. So I collectively work with the ASEAN for about 5 years. A lot of initiatives to come up, particularly the one that we always like to say is the prompt pay and the pay nows, interoperability, the connection. That's quite a big step for us that we see as a success. A success in terms of the financial integration, at least a payment settlement integration in ASEAN.
All right, thank you. All right, so now this will be my last reflection, because we keep on being receiving questions from the audience, from the listeners. Thank you for all the questions. Again, for all of the viewers and listeners, if you have questions, please put it in the chat box immediately, so that we will ensure that all these questions are able to be addressed during the online discussion. Our online discussion will be until 12 noon. So if you do have any questions, please raise it up. All right, so this is my last reflection point. Again, it's to Pitchaya's presentation on the ASEAN banking integration framework. I think as an end user, like me, I would be really happy if Malaysian banks are everywhere in ASEAN. I'll be happy if CIMB or Maybank is in Phuket, so while I'm going to Phuket or Chiang Mai or Bangkok, I will just can take the money out and use it. Now, isn't it from the banking perspective that this will add more competitiveness within the banks? And as a result of this competitions, smaller banks will be undermined by larger banks. So it will definitely it's a winning or losing kind of game at the end of the day. So what do you think? I mean, for me, as I said, I'm really happy if my bank is there. And someone might not be happy if his bank is not up to the standard of the other regional players. What do you think about this?
You got to understand, not that Malaysia bank only that come to Thailand. It's also some Thai bank that go to Malaysia. So when we first with the first phase of the implementation of this framework, you can see a little bit of the pushback from the local voice, particular from the banking system. Of course, they're scared of competition, but again, in terms of efficiency, like in order just to be able to move across the border and give the side of the financial services to people, and be treated like a local bank, that would actually create more market efficiency. And with the competition, is actually put all the local bank just trying to develop a new strategy and just to give more option banking product or the others financial services. So they have to actually develop themselves to compete with the bank from other country in the region. So at the end of the day, it seemed like, okay, it may not good for a smaller bank, but this is not really a bad thing. Competition is something that boosts efficiency, and at the end of the day, it's actually offer the consumer, like the client, just to have more option and could bring us to more integration too.
Okay. So hypothetically, if I understand your explanation is, for instance, like Malaysia and Singapore, where we love to travel and we probably have the higher ability to travel across the region, where these countries, which including Indonesia and Thailand, we can go to Myanmar, we can go to Laos, we can go to Cambodia. Right, so definitely there is a need to have our local banks in Cambodia and Myanmar, but perhaps the local banks in Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos were not able to open their banks in Malaysia if they do not have the travelers from these countries, right? Because there's probably not so much of utilizations of these local banks in Malaysia, Indonesia, or Thailand. So once these banks from this some sort of a more developing country in ASEAN goes into the least developing country, isn't it that the local banks in the least developing country will be affected and will be undermined by the more developing countries' local banks?
They would be affected, yes. And that is why what I mentioned is they need to actually able to learn more and develop more when it's come to financial technology, financial innovation, and also try just to come up with a strategy to offer a new financial services. Just to make some further clarification, most of the bank that go to those countries is actually to support the business too, right? Not just the traveler. So is that in that case, it's easier just to give loans or be able just to help with the financial transaction when the cross-border or the multi-corporations, cross-border multi-corporations go there. It's about the self-adjustment. And of course, as Tomo mentioned, financial integration, there's the pro and the con. And the government official definitely has to find a way to give them a certain level of the support, like financial literacy, and just to see if any kind of the financial support to build up their capacity building to compete with the other bank too. But it's like I said, ASEAN has this 2+X approach. So with this country like Myanmar, Cambodia, or Laos, if they're not yet ready, they don't have to join just yet until they think that they're strong enough or they're ready enough to join.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Now, just a very quick one. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. Let me elaborate. Well, actually, I used to be the central banker, so let me add more sort of a regulator's perspective. First of all, you need to understand the sort of uniqueness of banking, particularly even the Thai bank coming to Cambodia, they may not be the stronger bank because banking business, the funding source is always local currency. Of course, the Khmer access to the Khmer Rial or Lao, Lao Kip, local banks always has a bigger and easier access to local currency, which will be the funding source. So the reason that the banks operating regionally or go cross-border is to support relatively large corporates, or the focus will be the wholesale banking, most likely. So it's not something that the people in the local town start feeling that, because of the financial integration, local banks will disappear. No. So the point is, this eventually will help the more cross-border trade and the expansion of local factory go outside of own country. And if the local banks are not supporting enough, let's say Lao company or Cambodian company cannot be supported by Lao banks, Cambodian banks, then Thai banks can help them to go to Thailand. So you need to look at actually what sort of market segment will be impacted by the financial integration, and what will be the most likely outcome. Again, in general, financial integration, the banking integration will increase the competition. But the level of integration and how that would impact, you need to have a bit more thorough analysis. And again, in that regard, I really don't think the integration would create the situation the local banks are put in inferior position. Of course, Europe, it's a single currency. Still, it's a different situation. So they may have more sort of a banking consolidation, and they may see the dominance. But even in Europe, local banks are not disappearing because of various reasons. So I think still, I believe the integration merits would outweigh the cost.
Right, thank you. At least it's reassuring that there is actually the functions of the central bank to prepare on the the safety cushion net, the safety net for the local banks when we have fully integrated. Thank you. All right, I think I should stop there by reflecting both of your discussions. Yeah, and let's turn on to our audience as well as to our listeners. Thank you once again, those who are joining us. We truly appreciate your participation, your presence, as well as your commitment to our online discussions today. Now, let us go straight to the questions that we've got here, shall we? Now, Taufik Iskandar asked, when do you think ASEAN +3 would achieve near parity in terms of infrastructure, settlement, liquidity, and costs, as well as access to info to achieve meaningful capital market integration? I think, Tomo, you should get these questions.
Okay. First of all, we continue to have national differences, and which is important. We will not harmonize all the regulations. And also, again, I mentioned about the banking and the banking integration. which leads to some of the kind of, we call it sovereign bank nexus, because banking system plays quite important role in the economy. As I said, they are sort of a funding sources local currency, and regulation is under the local regulation, and the government bond is very important source of collateral, which will be the basis of the liquidity. So the integration of the banking inevitably be limited. I don't expect the kind of a whole integration of banking in ASEAN. Capital market is a bit different. Capital market is more standardized market. So the ASEAN Capital Market Forum is, for example, discussing the governance code, also the green bond, social bond, sustainability bond standard. But we also need to respect the sort of retail market, and particularly sort of the retail investors protection. And so the market may have differences at the level of the market development, awareness, also the financial education, and the sophisticatedness of the retail investors. That is important. We may be able to create more common approach for the wholesale market. That is what we are trying to create. ASEAN Plus 3 is focusing on the professional investors only market. So by focusing on the professionals, we can create more sort of a similar markets. So that's why we are promoting the creation, establishment of a professional investors only market. So professionals, by definition, they should be able to understand English as a common language of finance. They should be able to understand international accounting rules. So the disclosure rule doesn't have to be local rules, but international. Likewise, various restrictions can be exempted, and we may be able to create a common approach. So that is the approach. For settlement, we continue to have local currencies, different currencies. So it's not easy to have uniform system. And currently, when it comes to the cross-border, well, actually, we call it the correspondent banking system. So the settlement is done through the network of banks. So it may take time, but we may be able to create some efficient transactions. One initiative led by ASEAN is so-called the local currency settlement framework. So the local banks operating multiple jurisdictions can be recognized, and they may be able to facilitate local currency settlement with some of the exemption from the local rules. So again, the integration will take place, but the level of integration and harmonization varies, inevitably varies, and that's desirable. But again, the point is how we can ensure the interoperability, which would reduce the cost of moving the money the other jurisdiction. So that is really our focus.
So there is no a definite answer as to when, but no. your answer is about like, let's have all of these processes in place. Let's have all this system in place for us to see when this will happen.
As I said, for the corporate sector, I mean corporate bond market, we've been promoting the AMBIF, ASEAN Plus Multi-Currency Bond Issuance Framework, which is the common issuance program. So it's now already taking place. But for the rest, settlement, banking, consumer protection, I think it's better to keep the national difference.
Thank you. Right, let's move to the next questions. To Asai Sayaka. I hope I'm mentioning your name correctly. Forgive me if I'm wrong. And I think I talked with this too with Pitchaya yesterday. But perhaps that is another opportunity for you to explain this. Is there a possibility that ASEAN would have a single currency? If yes, what are the advantages? If no, what are the constraints? Over to you, Pitchaya.
really feel like Tomo know more than me about this one. So, because actually, there was a discussion maybe over 10 years ago, and not just for ASEAN, but also ASEAN plus 3. Like I think this is a more like a discussion. Is this called? I think it's common currency something. No, Tomo, if you remember, just like feel free to chip in later on. But I think Tomo also mentioned we're not looking just to have a common currency in ASEAN. What the ASEAN member country trying just to move forward is more about to have this local currency settlement or like trading the local currency bond. That would be better and fit better when it's come to the the mechanism in the Southeast Asia region. So there's when you need this sort of common currency, there's so many requirements that we need to get it done. We need to set up a certain appropriate bands when just to how to synchronize the different currency in the region. We obviously see some issues of a certain currency in the region when it comes to dollarization issues, or when you're looking at the hyperinflation, those kind of things could be we could consider as a constraint why we shouldn't have a common currency in the region. So the best way to go around is ASEAN then develop the idea that introduced in the ASEAN plus 3 collaboration is the local currency bond and local currency settlement. I feel like I should give this to Tomo to explain more, because I'm sure he know more than me about this thing.
Go on,
Okay.
Tomo.
Okay, so the basic requirements to have a common currency area, economic theory tells you that you need to have 3 free movements. One is the free movement of goods, free movement of people, free movement of capital. And you need to sort of a benchmark, to what extent ASEAN is reaching that sort of the freeness. Free movement of goods, yes, largely, but we still see some sort of so-called non-tariff barriers. Tariff is reduced almost to 0, but there are a lot of so-called tariff barriers. Free movement of people, some extent, but of course we still have a visa. If you look at Europe, no visa required. Once you enter in Euro area, EU, you can go anywhere you want. So in that sense, there are restrictions on the movement of the people. And the free movement of capital. Free movement of capital, again, we have difference in currencies that impedes the free movement, but also we have some difference in the sort of capital movements regulations. But the currency is not only the restriction of the free movement of capital. There's a bit of the stickiness. Even when we talk about the optimal currency area, even like Malaysia, East Malaysia and West Malaysia, to what extent people really moving, East and the West freely with a free will, or maybe there's a kind of stickiness. The people wants to stay in the local community. So there is always some sort of impediments. It doesn't have to be the regulation, maybe social, psychological impediments, which creates the barrier to impede the free movement of people and goods and even capital. In such case, the transfer of funds is important. So if you see some difference in economic developments, maybe from West Malaysia to East Malaysia, the money, sort of a transfer will take place. So different region, normally central government try to ensure the equalized development. So they will make a transfer and they try to ensure. So which means there is some sense of a political community, and the political union is necessary to create the single currency area. without that, you won't be able to justify. Like if the East Malaysia people, West Malaysia people go against, and people say, no, I don't want to send the money to the other part of the country. That's if that happens, you can't stay in the local currency. So I mean the same currency. So this is really sort of about what economic theory tells you. Again, with a political will, this transfer can take place. And maybe with a political will, you may be able to create a single common currency area. So what Europe did was simply they thought that they shouldn't go back to the before World War II. So the people who really push the single currency, they want to sort of make sure that the Europe will not go back, and then try to create the Europe as a community. So with a strong political will, the single currency in Europe was established. Looking at the Asia and ASEAN, well, there may be some sort of political will, but not as the same way as Europe. So, and again, we are still in the process of nation building. So I think we need to understand these differences. So economic theory, political situation. That's why I sort of put the condition, economic linkages as well as political linkage as the condition to create optimal currency. I mean, optimal condition for the financial integration.
Yeah, I think political will also be part of the answers from these coming questions from our cousin Port Suffold. Now, Port asked us, like, how can frontier markets or countries with early stage of financial capital market development be part of the integration? How can they benefit from this? So, Tomo, would you like to take this question?
Yes. Well, I think I partially answered the question. Again, the integration is a long process. We don't need to invite them to meet the end goal from the beginning. And the integration process takes time. And part of the community creates the peer pressure, peer learning, peer support. And that is really the benefit of a part of being a community. Again, that's why I mentioned that it's better to compare with other part of the world where there's no sense of community. Individual market needs to develop by themselves. Political economy, we often talk about so-called blame shift. That's a kind of a political sort of the kind of jargon, the politics. Often these sort of regional agreements create a sort of a pressure on the government to make things implementable. They may face some sort of opposition in the domestic community, but because of the regional agreement, they mention to them, oh, because of this, we need to do this. So this is so-called the blame shift. And this often creates the sort of action, necessary action by the government. Again, the political pressure group may not always be the majority. That's also the political theory tells you. The pressure group is the ones with a big voice. Big voice always may not be the majority. But government can bring the most beneficial outcome. And often this blame shift create a desirable outcome. So again, to get sort of power, I believe the small countries, small market, nascent market can join the community, but no need to start from the end goal. That's my point.
Can I just add just one point from Tomo?
Sure.
Because when it's come to the member country with the early stage of the development, ASEAN itself under the AEC blueprint, they have this particular path for this so-called initiative for ASEAN integration. which means that it's more like a capacity building for the 4 countries in Southeast Asia, namely Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, PDR, and also Vietnam. This is just to help them to understand and get better knowledge about the area that they still not entirely understand just much, or it's just a new area for them. So that's for the whole ASEAN economic community itself. For finance, we also have the steering committee, which ADB also the co-chair of it when it comes to capacity building. And in that area, the country the 4 countries that I mentioned, they also get to come up with the list of the demand of the area that they want just to get the capacity building program and or the training program or the workshop, like training workshop for that particular area. So this kind of thing, actually, like what Tomo just said, peer learning, peer support for each other, and reach out to the partner, international organization partner like ADB, for example, like OECD, or also the other country donor like US or Australia, just to come out and provide an opportunity of capacity building program for them. So this would be another element that helping all those countries out.
I guess that relates to striking the balance between all stakeholders and actors. Now, which comes me to the next questions by Mustaqiza Zakaria. Thank you to all listeners and viewers. I can see that some of you have been from a different country of the regions and different institutions. Some of the faces that I know, some of them from the Malaysian Ministry of Finance, some of us from our research partners across the region. Thank you so much. So those are these questions by Mustaqiza. How can we strike a balance between harmonization and standardization of the financial policies across borders on having an efficient approach towards integration of financial and capital markets? Perhaps Pitchaya, would you like to take on this question, please? Since you talked about this a while ago.
Yes. So what we have seen so far, they don't really try just to come up with the regional standardization. And I think Tomo already mentioned that we should match with the benchmark with international standard that already out there. That's for example, like when we talk about trade, it's WHO. That's the minimal. That's like that's what most of the country has to at least try to reach that standard. And when it's come to trade integration, always beyond the WTO. It's the same thing as well when it's come to finance. There's certain standard, like let me give an example of the taxation. For example, we have the economic such an exchange of information, or this kind of tax transparency. So this thing that already implemented at this or trying to be introduced by the organization like OECD, we can starting to study and learn at the certain level how can we adopt. Or even for the banking sector or the insurance sector, they already have the international standard that trying just to match that at least, or make that as a benchmark for the standardization and harmonization. Moving forward, they may come up with others framework. One example that we can think that I can think off the top of my head right now is we're talking about the green bond market. ASEAN has their ASEAN green bond standard. Am I correct, Tomo? I think it's that one. So that's the one that actually they try to adopt they get from international standard to and try to adopt and try to revise it to fit to the region. So starting one step at a time and then just moving forward. Yeah.
Let me add. This is also a challenge for Europe. Let me sort of explain. In Europe, there's two legal legislation. One is so-called the EU regulation, which may be applied to local markets directly, and also EU directive. The EU directive needs to be translated to the local legislation, and there is always some sort of area of interpretation of EU directive. In ASEAN, we don't have the regulation and a harmonized approach. So there is always the area of local interpretation. And it's not really, we are not harmonized. We are not harmonizing. But standardization is desirable to ensure the interoperability. At least the common approach, common understanding how things can be applied to certain activities. These need to have some sort of a common understanding. It's not harmonization, but that's the standardization. To me, standardization is much easier than harmonization. And that's the approach that we are taking. And always we can find a way to ensure the interoperability because this is how to connect the different markets. So how to strike the balance? To me, to the extent possible, we can harmonize, but mostly we will aim to standardize various regulations and approach. But as an open regionalism and to push the integration, we must ensure the interoperability.
Right. Interoperability is the key of today's sessions today. Now, Tomo, you talk about ASEAN +3. There is a question by an anonymous attendee. I guess it's a bit related with the political world, but I think the question asked about the changings of government, if I just may put the questions directly, are there challenges with achieving ASEAN +3 integration, considering changes in each nation politics whenever elections or changes in government happened? Your comment, please.
Well, I think, comparing to Europe and East Asia, big difference is the integration is taking from, I would say, bottom up, economic linkage, trade, but EU, that is more sort of top down. So in a political will. So to me, ASEAN, East Asia's integration is just a matter of time. I mean, as economic integration continues to be enhanced, we will see, because there are huge benefit of talking about the integration. Whether we aim for political integration, I don't think so. But EU, as I mentioned, because of the need for the transfer between the different regions, they need to come up with some sort of the common approach of the budget and budget linked to the taxation, and the taxation is very much political issue. So they must have some sense of political union, and that's why they have European Parliament. Here in Asia, we don't have such sort of a political mechanism to ensure our accountability. We continue to act as a nation, and it's sort of an agreement among the nation drives the integration. So I don't think we will see sort of a political union in Asia. Of course, politics will affect the pace of economic integration. But to me, this sort of economic linkage is a reversible trend, even though this COVID, people cannot move, but the movement of goods, movement of capital continue to increase. And information flows is far much faster. Of course, because of the politics, some jurisdiction may face some challenges, but eventually, I would say, regardless of the political regime, this would be a reversible trend. So that's my comment.
Anything from you, Pitchaya?
Actually, nothing much from my side, because I agree with what Thomas said. the political will, it's somehow would just help to speed up the integration process, of course. But then when we look at ASEAN, I feel like in the financial sector, they're already driving and moving smoothly but slowly.
But
but
strongly or
strong,
consistently.
yeah, firmly but slowly. So we see that, and we don't see much of the political pressure when it's come to financial sector that much. So just to me, it's the not much of the comment on this point, because I think Thomas already mentioned. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming towards the end of the webinar or the online discussions today. Perhaps there's just one question left by an anonymous attendee. I guess this is a very general question. I assume that this question comes from an economics student, those who are still perhaps in seeking jobs in the market. It's nothing, so it's not about ASEAN integration. It's just like a career advice. I think it's good as well, because I think we are reaching out to all sectors in our community when it comes to our online discussions. All right, so perhaps if I may ask Pitchaya and then to Tomo, can I know what are the jobs for economists? And what are the career prospects, and what should be the focus of being an economist? So I think the person actually wants to know more about your experience as an economist at your respective organizations, and how do you think that such position enables you to contribute to the betterment of our region? Perhaps if we may start with Pitchaya.
Yeah, sure. I started my career as an economist, but I'm not sure I'm like 100% economist in the past 5 years. Well, basically, when we talk, when we hear the word economist, it's more about analysis, looking at the number, data collection, how to use that data, just to in the research and get some sort of the outcome or central outcome, and then give the policy suggestion or recommendation, or at least implication to the government official. So I'm not so sure in this question is particular for international organization, or it just in general for like at national level. So there's some various things that economists can do. The first job that I started was an economic researcher. So that's the thing that actually more like matching to my educational background back then. When you come to international organization, there's both part of the job that you could do, like I think Tomo can explain later. There's the operational part, and also the more like research part. So, but however, is complement each other. So economists most likely just to work in the research department, trying just to produce a report, economic papers, or that kind of thing. From my job right now, capacity building economists, what we do, of course, the name already speak it out loud. We organize training workshop and also training program, capacity building, including the conference, and we produce the knowledge product. Knowledge product mean book, policy brief, or even opinion blog, or we also produce e-learning course. So this kind of thing, we get it from our regular working experience, and then we combine it with the the knowledge that we have back from school and back from the research job. So I think that's a various thing that you can do as an economist. But at the moment, like from myself, I would just focus on capacity building. I think I should turn the floor to Tomo just to add. Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't know my experience would benefit. Maybe my case may be unique. I mean, everybody is unique. And also, I'd like to sort of mention, actually, if you're interested in a kind of a policy area, The policy is not, unfortunately, like academics. So it's not clean, nitty-gritty things. And you need to have a various sort of information. And also you need to be trained thinking logically. Actually, my BA is in law. So I have a legal background. And well, I didn't have any, actually, I just happened to be in a Bank of Japan. I had when I had a job interview, actually, I had other job interviews in different companies, and my friend told me that I had to meet a person from the BOJ, but one friend cannot go, so why don't you join me? And I sort of joined the interview, and then somehow I liked the people who I met, and then I decided to work for the Bank of Japan. And being a central bank, of course, you need to understand economics. I mean, it's a must. But also being a central banker, learning economics, I always questioned, to what extent economic assumption can apply to the real world. Economic theory assumes people are perfectly rational, perfect information. Of course, these days economics has changed, and I guess probably we will see more Nobel Prize in the neuroeconomics or maybe psychology. I mean, like Kahneman. So you need to keep learning when you want to apply things. So I also studied the computer science because I was quite interested in the computer simulation. So I guess one advice that I can make is, maybe you can start from the Economist, but you need to keep learning, and you need to keep thinking, how things can be explained and how things can be applied, how your idea can be fit into. Sometimes you may need to understand things more deeply. Because reality cannot be based on your assumption. Details are important. We often say devils are in detail. So, that will be my comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Tomo. I think the last two sentences are very powerful. Like from the economic and financial capital integration, we've talked about a bit of journey seeking experience or soul searching experience, which I think it is just what do you call it? Melts everything together. Yeah. So once again, thank you to all of the speakers. At the Institute of Democracy and Economic Affairs Malaysia, our job is to advocate all of these policy papers and policy settings to all our stakeholders, to policy readers, as well as to the community in the people. What we intend to do as an institute is to reach out to more visibility in our country as well as in the region on what's happening in ASEAN. And this week, we've talked about the financial and capital integration in ASEAN. And I think that, again, from the Institute point of view, it is very timely for us to discuss this. The inception of COVID-19 actually exacerbates some inequality in certain aspects, but within that complexity itself, there are opportunities that we also have to explore. And one of these opportunities is the financial and capital integration. So we hope with the pandemic, it actually fosters and it actually expedite the process of the integrations, because now we all know the importance of it while we're at home, but we can't actually meet face to face. We cannot go to the shops, or we cannot travel to buy things. We have this online setup, and it's all been done integratedly. So that is something that we should appreciate. So thank you to all our listeners, to all our viewers, to our supporters from the participants. I can see some of the names are from our regional partners, the institutes and research firms. We also have colleagues from the Malaysian Ministry of Finance. Thank you for joining us. IDEAS, as always, wanting to be the conduit of all actors and stakeholders in the region to craft these wonderful discussions and output. We hope that this will be ongoing for the next period of time, because we are a strong believer of economic liberalization as well as democratizations. My special thanks to our panelists today, Mr. Satoru Yamadera, the advisor of the Economic Research and Regional Cooperation Department at the ASEAN Development Bank, as well as Dr. Pitchaya Sirivunnabood, the Capacity Building and Training Economist at the ASEAN Development Bank Institute, all the way from Japan for Dr. Pitchaya, all the way from Manila for Mr. Satoru. Thank you for being with us today. It was a very insightful discussion and a very fruitful discussion and ideas. We hope that this kind of network will be ongoing, and let's cooperate together and collaborate together or integrate together for a better future in our region. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to close the ASEAN Prosperity Initiative online discussions today. For the next discussion, we'll be exploring on the topics of food security as well as reopening of the borders. Stay tuned with us, and we'll keep you updated. For purpose of everyone here, we appreciate if you can follow us in our Twitter, in our LinkedIn and website. It's actually IDAS for the Institute of Democracy and Economic Affairs Malaysia. Once again, thank you. Stay safe, everyone. Stay at home and stay positive, and we'll see you again. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.